following episode most likely contains graphic language, details of violence, and murder, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 51 of Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast where I talk murder with my mother.
Lady right here.
That lady right there. And welcome to 2024. Sorry, I almost knocked this fucking huge garbage can over. Oh, God.
Sorry, we meant to be here a couple of months ago, but took us a little while
Every time.
to get our shit to fucking together.
Yes, it did. But here we are, 2024.
Be grateful, not hateful.
That's it. That's the one. But yeah, wishing everybody a happy and healthy new year. You have any resolutions, Mom?
Not really that I want to say out loud.
Nice. Fun. She's just going to think them in her head, and then you guys are all going to have to
And
guess.
then when I fuck them up, it won't be that big of a deal.
True. That's good.
Yeah.
I'm doing 75 hard.
I was supposed to start it with you, but I fucked it up the last 2 days in a row. I must have said it out loud.
Well, every time you have to restart. So 75 hard it's like a challenge. It's not a fitness challenge, but it's like a challenge where for 75 days I have to work out twice a day. I have to do one workout outside. Both of them have to be 45 minutes, which has been fun. It's been really tiring.
I struggled to have a 15-minute walk yesterday. So
yeah. I walked for 2 hours today with my 2-year-old who kept throwing herself on the ground and spitting at me. So that was really fun. But anyway, it made the time go way faster. What else do you have to do? You have to take a picture every day of yourself. You have to,
Naked.
well, yeah. No one go through my camera roll for 75 days. You have to, okay, now
you have to
how tired
read.
I am. You have to read 10 pages of a nonfiction book every day. You have to drink a gallon of water, which explains
So
my
Denika
huge
will be
cup.
peeing 16 times throughout this podcast.
I went twice before we started filming, so hopefully not. And what else? You have to, I don't know what else you have to do, but maybe I'm missing something. I'm tired. It's been 3-4 days. And
I think
this
you have
shit's
to
draining me.
choose like some sort of set like nutrition
Diet.
plan.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, I eat relatively okay. I've cut out like sugars and stuff like that. So, and I stopped smoking pot, which has been my identity for 20 years. So we'll see how that goes. I'm doing okay so far.
The next podcast will be very monotone.
If I'm completely bald, then you guys know why, because I shaved my head. But yeah, or I could, I guess, just smoke a joint. But no, actually, this was my 9th year. I just celebrated 9 years no alcohol. So that is probably better for everybody around me.
It is better. We're all safer for sure.
Yeah. And less traumatizing for my children, I'm sure. They've never seen me drunk, obviously. So, but yeah. So I hope all of you guys have, if you don't have resolutions, just don't be a piece of shit in 2024. That's kind of like everybody's baseline. Piece of shit here, you're above. Okay, everybody?
Well, from my experience in the past 3 days, a lot of people missed that memo, but that's okay.
2024. Cheers.
I'm going to plan to be more outspoken in 2024. So
I hope that's...
You hope I'm still employed.
I hope you're still employed, and yeah.
I'm not going to write it down in any emails, though.
No, just think it in your head.
Yeah.
That's what I learned working in an office. Just think it in your head. Don't send an email asking someone if they can read, because that won't get you anywhere good. Oops. So yeah, basically we have some current events. We have been traveling the world. Mom went to Hawaii. I went to Mexico. And that's all. So that's the world.
That's
right
the world to us.
Yep.
We both had sicknesses from hell.
Yeah, we had COVID.
And we gave it to 14 members of our family at
a family reunion. Well, it was actually our Auntie Kim's surprise 60th birthday. Amazing to see everybody. Loved it.
We loved it so much that we gave them all COVID.
It wasn't actually my fault, because it was Kiana, my daughter. She woke up the first night with the highest fever ever, and it didn't break for like 3 days. So she was a joy. It was really
the walls
fun.
were super thin at the hotel.
It was like 100-year-old hotel.
Yeah.
So
haunted,
which maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a great time. Other than that,
super fun. Yeah.
The fact that we all spent the next 4 or 5 days in bed, but
probably almost killed a couple family members.
I think we did.
Yeah. Sorry. Love you guys. If you're listening, if you're not listening, I'm not sorry.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Where's your loyalty?
But yeah, had a really cool Wrapped for our Spotify. Got lots of listeners worldwide, which is super cool.
Super cool. Thanks, everybody.
We love you guys. And if you guys love us, share us, subscribe, like our stuff, send us some money on Patreon, all that fun stuff.
I want to give a shout out to Sandy B.
Oh, Sandy
B.
She's a Sandy B.
She is a Sandy B. She's listened to, she says she's totally caught up now.
There you
so
go.
she
Well,
was like,
had fucking 2 months to catch up. So
she was
sorry,
chomping
everybody.
at the bit today. Like, so I'm caught up on the podcast. Like, yeah, we're recording today. So
Well, I love you, Sandy, and I appreciate all of your support in every venture I venture into. So.
You're better than most of our family that doesn't listen, Sandy B.
Well, I'll get there. They're a bunch of... Anyway, what are they? What do they call themselves? Something
The greedy bees.
The greedy bees. All of my grandma and all her aunts have bees tattooed on their feet because they're greedy bees, apparently. Some family inside joke.
They're not listening, bees.
Nope. Yeah, you guys know we love to do current events. We've been out of touch with reality in the last month and a half. So we do know, if you guys remember, the Idaho murders, the 4 college kids that were murdered in Idaho, the house that they were murdered in has been knocked down, which I don't really think, I think they should have waited because I know that the trial for the suspected perpetrator of that crime hasn't even gone on trial yet.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, sometimes it's impactful to take
The jury.
jurors
Yeah.
through and do a tour of the area to make it like a little, like resonate a little bit more.
Well, and that was one thing at CrimeCon because, I mean, actually the family member of one of the kids was there.
Ethan Chapin.
Yeah, his mom actually was there. But other people who were there, who was it? Was it not Nancy? Was it Nancy Grace? Nancy Grace, talk to us.
Nance.
Hey, Nancy. She told us that we should actually go and drive there.
Because
and look.
we actually live, like, we didn't realize how close it was.
Mm-hmm.
We probably have mentioned this before, but I think it's only about 5 hours away from
and
where
we have
we
nothing
live.
better to do, so
Yeah.
we probably would have. But no.
Now we
it's knocked
can't.
Down. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the times it is really impactful, and even I think it was the really weird layout of the house because it was such a strange layout, right? The middle floor is where the
killer entered.
Yeah, which is where the entrance was.
And then there was like a downstairs, which had another entrance.
And then an upstairs where I think it's where 2 of the murders took place. And it's actually the 2 that they suspect were the targets of the murder.
Yes.
So we will keep you guys updated, obviously, as that breaks and the trial starts. I believe it's going to start, I thought it was June of this year.
I can't wait till that starts.
Yeah.
That motherfucker needs to
Well, I know that he
be called into account.
Yeah. So I also am very intrigued. I don't want to use the word excited because that makes me look like a psychopath, but I'm intrigued because there are a lot of mysteries in this case, and there was a lot of evidence collected. There were a lot of, just weird things connected to that case. So I am intrigued to see
I am
all
also
of the
intrigued.
details that come out about that.
Yep.
So also we've kind of focused on doing more Canadian cases. We're actually really hoping for 2024. Another resolution of the podcast is to do something about our shitty justice system. And you guys know we like to refer to it as the not victim justice because victims never receive justice in this country. And if they do, it's very rare.
Perpetrator justice.
It is. It's criminal justice.
Yep.
So the criminals are the ones usually that are, they murder somebody. There are so many loopholes in our Canadian justice system that they're usually out within 5 to 10 years, which is ridiculous.
And even in the case of multiple murders, a serial killer, which is part of the case we're going to cover today, where someone actually killed 3 generations of a family.
Yeah, right here in British Columbia.
Yeah, you're going to see, like, they're really the time that the person got. I mean, it doesn't even come close to what the person deserved.
And also, this was the time of the great faint hope clause, which you guys know we fucking love on this show.
Fuck.
But yeah, I mean, even to, again, if you guys aren't familiar with that, go back and listen because I'm not telling you what it is. No, it's where once a person has served their, what is it, 12 years or something? It's a certain amount of time. It might be 10 years. It's where that perpetrator, that criminal, is able to every 2 years come in front of the family members, in front of the parole board, and basically plead their case as to why they should get out, which re-victimizes the families
every single time. Like, can you imagine?
Yeah.
And fortunately, that does not exist anymore. But the people that were convicted under the faint hope clause are grandfathered in.
Yeah.
So they
can remember
still,
Clifford Olson, who not only would have the parole hearings every 2 years, would also be writing letters and selling books and basically re-traumatizing the family any chance that he got, which rest in piss, Clifford Olson. I hate you, but it's fine. But yeah, so the case today, as Mom did touch on, is a case that had 3 generations of one family murdered. So it's known as the Wells Gray murders, and it happened in the early 80s. Yeah, put your glasses on, Mom, so you can see.
Yeah, and as we know, the 80s, as we've touched on before, were a different time. Like, everyone was a lot more carefree in the 80s. Yeah, I was living my best fucking life in the 80s. Like, I wish I was still right back in the 80s right now.
Well, other than all the molestation that was going on.
I mean, that part was terrible, but the being able to just have the hitchhiking and the freedom,
which also led to many murders, and many women going missing.
But, however, it was free travel.
There's a bonus. But yeah, the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, basically up until probably about 10 years ago, when everybody was on one of these, a cell phone. There's cameras everywhere. There's things that basically make it a little harder. Obviously, all of the genetic, the DNA, all of that
familial
stuff,
DNA,
all of that. Everything has basically made it a little bit harder to get away with murder.
Although I also feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, that everyone in the 80s and probably the 70s and somewhat the 90s was also swimming down the river of denial, because as much as was happening, no one really ever even paid attention or called anyone out for it.
Yeah, and
like,
that's
someone abused me, and everyone would be like, it's fine.
Shame. It's sweep it under the rug.
Totally.
Don't tell. I don't believe you. Or they wouldn't do that. We've talked about that.
Yep.
The Menendez brothers, when they were on trial, what did they say? We killed our parents because our dad molested us for years, and our mom
was like, nah.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, you even said, oh my God, the shit that these kids are making up, right? I think that if somebody perpetrates a murder and someone has abused them for years and years, that is, I mean, maybe this is the Canadian in me speaking, but they maybe shouldn't have the same penalty as somebody who was not abused their whole life. Because what does that do to you psychologically when somebody, especially your own parent or family member, is molesting you, especially as a male, right? Because, I mean, obviously as a female as well. But
I mean, especially if anyone, because there was so much of it back in the day. And I know there still is, but people are speaking out more now. Yeah. And people are, I hope people in your family are believing you more now. Yeah. And
that's
people can also,
right?
And people are probably more afraid of the reach you have now. Like, kids have phones, kids have social media, kids have an easy access. Yeah, it's a cancel culture.
Which I agree with cancel culture in a fraction. I think that teaching and counseling someone, counsel culture is kind of my thing. Yeah. Getting to but if you're a molester, like, no, canceled, like, see you later.
Yeah.
But
in this country, canceled for 5 minutes.
Well, you don't even go to jail. Okay, this is actually something on current events. Do you guys remember? Maybe not, but there was a Amber Alert, I want to say in like 2011.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not even. This guy named Randall Hopley, who is the creepiest guy I've ever seen in my 31 years, maybe like the third creepiest guy. But he kidnapped and I think sexually assaulted a stranger, a 3-year-old boy. Yeah. A 3-year-old boy.
Out of his
bedroom. And this motherfucker, I saw the other day, he was wanted. He was out. He ran away from his halfway house.
Yeah.
Why are you out? Why are you in a halfway house? Why are you not in jail? You kidnapped a 3-year-old boy. That wasn't an accident. He didn't fucking stumble into your vehicle and then you took off with him across the country.
And then returned him like 6 days later.
But you obviously, you assaulted him. You should be in jail, even for just a kidnapping. If you just took a boy out of his bed,
and
you should be in jail.
ice cream.
Even then, you should be in jail for the rest of your life.
Agreed.
If you are going to commit a crime against a child, remember, if you guys want to donate to the island that we're going to send all these fucking people to, like, something needs to change. That's basically the end of my rant. But something needs to change in this country, and that's our 2024, 2025, 2026, 2020. That's our resolution for the rest of this podcast. So, but yes. So with that, we will jump right into our episode today.
Episode 51.
Episode 51.
So George and Edith Bentley were avid campers.
I'm jumping right into it before I even got a chance. George was 66, and although he was said to be really friendly, he would always rather be camping or fishing with his wife, 59-year-old Edith. Edith was the more social of the two, but also loved getting into the wilderness with her husband. The two were living in the city of Port Coquitlam,
which is right here, by the way, BTW.
That's where my studio is. In 1979, George's heart condition caused him to stop working, so the couple decided to slow down and live out their camping dream. They had rented out their house and traveled in their red and silver Ford pickup that had a Vanguard camper on top. George made some customizations to the truck, including a sunset mural on the window, as well as a tin boat on top.
And I can honestly say that this would be my dream. Like
a rooftop tent.
I'm sure you're surprised by the fact that I'm saying that.
Yeah, super.
But I would love to
Almost
camp
fainted.
for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
I would love to.
The best is, I was going to say something about sometimes when someone looks like they're camping, Mom just refers to them as camping, but they're not camping.
Well, that would take a lot of pressure off.
It would.
Wouldn't
you didn't have to brush your hair ever again.
Never.
Dry shampoo? What dry shampoo? Who cares?
Who
Just
fucking
wring it
cares?
out and use it to cook
Put
something.
on a hat.
There you go.
I was camping today.
Yeah, Mom's camping right now. So in the winter months, they plan to sell their home and buy a new RV and take off down to Arizona.
How fun is that?
Yeah. What is it? Snowbirds.
Yeah.
Right? The couple had 3 adult children and 6 grandchildren. Their children's names were Jackie, Sharon, and Brian. As their dream was to upsize to the motorhome, they rented their home out in Port Coquitlam and set out on trips around British Columbia.
And if you guys don't know, because a lot of you don't live here, this province that we live in is like astonishingly beautiful. And we have different climates. Like up in the interior of our province, we have like a desert climate, but with lakes and different foliage. And around here, we have the coast and the ocean and the mountains and still lakes.
And then even like on the Vancouver Island, which is where we're from, we would go like deep into logging roads and find like beautiful. This is kind of what they were into. They like to kind of go off the beaten path.
Not just like I just recently bought a Dodge Ram just so I can go deeper in the middle of nowhere, just so that I can like be not around people.
Which again,
so that was these guys
easy to
also.
find. Yeah, here it's really easy to find. I think it's kind of it's obviously the population is fucking exploding, but it's harder to find. But in the 80s, it was.
But
probably
I found it
prime.
all last year.
Yeah,
so
it's
still
good
there.
then. Still good. So they would trade off which child's home that they would stay at in between their camping trips. Before they took off for their adventures, just the two of them, they planned a camping trip with their daughter Jackie, her husband Bob, and their 2 daughters, Janet and Karen, who were 13 and 11. And they would also be coming along for the camping trip. 41-year-old Jackie Johnson was an avid photographer, and it was said she was always taking pictures. Like her camera was never far from her. She was always taking pictures of her family and her kids and just things around her.
And everyone said that she was like the most fun aunt. Like when you see any kind of the programs that are about this case, they're saying like she was the most loving and like she would cuddle you and pay attention to you. And
Love
like,
aunts like that.
Totally.
I have a couple aunts that are like that. Love you guys. Love you, aunts.
Yeah.
They're actually my great aunts, so it makes them even better. They're Mom's aunts because I get my banjo out. So her husband, Bob, was 44, and he was said to be a practical joker a motorbike enthusiast, and a really good worker. He had the same job for 25 years at the Gorman Brothers lumber sawmill. 13-year-old Janet and 11-year-old Karen were said to be happy girls, and they actually got along really well.
Yeah,
which
they were always playing
sisters,
together.
Yeah, it's kind of
Only a couple years apart.
Yeah, and they were playing piano. They would play piano together. They were in Girl Guides, so they were always trying to earn like different badges for Girl Guides, and probably selling cookies everywhere they could go. Remember that? Don't
I got
sell
kicked
me
out of
cookies.
brownies.
I got kicked out of Girl Guides, so the apple does not fall far from the tree. On August 2nd, they set off, and on August 3rd, 1982, George and Edith Bentley checked into the Dawson Falls campsite in Wells Gray Provincial Park. And when they were there, obviously this was the early 80s, so nobody had cell phones. But what they would do is they would leave every couple days, check in with some of their kids, let them know everyone's having a great time, and, head back. They had to find a payphone.
Put some paper plates on the tree to show show everyone where you were.
Yeah, or like some little fluorescent tape.
Yeah,
that
deer tape, hunting tape.
There you go.
And also, the park that they were going to, we've already touched on like how deep the wilderness that they like to go into was. But Wells Gray Park is actually 5,000 kilometers.
It's bigger than the whole downtown lower mainland.
And honestly, like I would love to go there. There's waterfalls, there's caves, there's lakes.
It's very vast.
It's so beautiful too, so rugged.
Yeah, that's why it makes this story even
more creepy.
It is because it's so vast and big and beautiful that it was a background of such a horrible murders. So everyone, again, they didn't think anything of it because, they're camping. There's so many of them there. There's 6 of them.
And they're not going to hear from them usually. Like when there's that many people camping, they're like, okay, well, they're having a great time.
Yeah.
Until on August 16th, Bob did not show up for work. And as we've said before, he was very, very diligent. He never missed a day of work
very
like his whole life.
And then obviously that probably set kind of a chain reaction because then they started to think, okay, if we haven't heard from him, no one's heard from anyone else.
Yeah.
So again, being very out of character, this made everyone worry, and a missing persons report was made for all of the 6 relatives.
Can you imagine?
No.
You see film of the rest of the family talking about it, and they're just like beside themselves. You see pictures of their son, their other son, and he's like,
even interviews
is asking, like, do you know where your parents are? Like, what do you think? And he's like, I have no idea.
Yeah, and that worry, like this always comes up somehow, but Mom is like my only person I talk to every day. I talk to you multiple times a day, and if I were to go missing, I mean, you don't believe it, but something is wrong. If you have a close familial connection with your close, like a unit.
Well, you say to me all the time, are
you alive? If she doesn't answer me,
because I'm more of a non-answerer than she is.
Yeah, because I'm always like, hello, are you alive? Like, I literally text you that probably like once every couple weeks because you don't answer me. Then it's like, I'm going to drive to your house.
I'm a fucking bitch and I don't answer anybody.
So the family, Jackie and Bob owned a beige Caravelle Plymouth, which I had to Google because they don't make those anymore. So it was a very 70s looking vehicle. So after almost 4 weeks, on September 13th, 1982, Mounties received a tip from a hiker that had been hiking on Battle Mountain near Clearwater.
It was a mushroom picker.
He had found an old burnt-out car, and he believed that this car would be connected to the family's disappearance. Because now, think about it, 6 relatives are missing. It's been 4 weeks. This is big news. This is like everyone's looking for them. Where could they be? And
they were also like the towns that are surrounding this park are small little towns where everyone knows each other. So, that was kind of their last known location. The police were going to door asking, like, have you seen these people? They were posting photos of the car. And so although the car was burnt to shit, basically, the police helicoptered to the rural scene, and it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, we talked about how vast it is. Yeah. So right away, that made them, obviously they found the car, and your car doesn't just catch on fire and you're missing. That's not, what happens. There's obviously something that has happened to have the car burnt and in hidden area.
And there had been forest fires in that area in like a couple years before, so they didn't know, like the mushroom picker didn't know, like, is this a result of a forest fire? But nothing around it was burnt.
But again, they've had this car. If you've seen this car, if you've seen this truck, if you've seen these people, kind of probably broadcasted on the radio, on the TV, on the news. So police, like Mom said, helicoptered to the rural scene, and they recall being able to smell and feel the death around them as they approached the old burnt-out car. And it was the Johnson's beige Plymouth. Given the state of the car, the police worried they might not be able to obtain proper evidence. As they peered into the back seat, they saw what appeared to be a charred mass of bones and ashes. They assumed these were the bodies of 2 of the missing family members.
So the trunk of the car was locked, but oddly, there were keys hanging out of the lock in the trunk, but they couldn't work the keys. And they thought, this is really weird. Like, why are the keys hanging out of here? But they had to get one of the officers to pry open the trunk. And when they used a crowbar, they were finally able to get the trunk open. And then they were shocked at what they had uncovered. The remnants of 2 small little bodies, and the tiny skulls were staring right as they opened the trunk. They could see 2 tiny skulls staring up at them.
Well, and like Mom said, having the family members interviewed, but when you watch even the investigators that worked on this case, like, this case is horrible. Any case we cover with a murder is horrible, but 6 family members, 6 people, 2 of them being children. And imagine opening a car after looking for them for almost a month and seeing 2 little skulls. Like, that's, you know exactly who that is.
And when you watch the interviews with the police officers that worked this case, they're still crying when they talk about it.
It's horrible. So there was a bullet hole right through the middle of the skull, and investigators knew that due to the size of the skulls, these were most likely the remains of Janet and Karen. The investigators believed that they had found 4 of the 6 family members. The pathologist, however, shocked investigators when they had said that they actually had all of the bodies in the car. Which is like, think about that, 6 people, 4 of them being full-sized adults and 2 children, were now just a pile of ash and bones.
And apparently they were burnt at such a high temperature that all 4 people in the back seat, all 4 adult bodies that were burnt, didn't even fill a half of a shopping bag. That's how much was left.
So they loaded the car into a cube van and brought it to the Vancouver crime lab because, like we said, this is a very small town. They didn't have the capacity in the crime lab. Maybe they didn't even have a crime lab there. I mean,
probably not.
Probably not. It was also the early 80s.
Also the 80s.
Yeah. But they could still not find the Bentley's truck and camper. A funeral was held for all the family members. And sadly, it was the same church that saw Jackie marry Bob Johnson probably, not even 20 years before.
Yeah.
75 officers canvassed the area of Clearwater and knocked on every door, and they also started a tip line. Police received a tip of 2 men with French accents that were seen in the Clearwater area and were seen driving George Bentley's truck. Composite sketches of the 2 men were released. And in April of 1983, they released a reenactment with actors on Global.
That looked like the family members.
Yeah. So a timeline is created, and police made a replica of George's truck and drove the truck the same route they believed that the 2 Frenchmen had went. They hoped that seeing the replica would jog the memory of anyone in the area. The truck had signs on it that read, "Have you seen a truck and camper similar since August 1982? Officers reached the Montreal area, but turned around when they had no more leads."
I still remember this. Like, I remember how scary it was, like, before they had found them. Like, I'm a kid at this point. I'm my mom's kid.
You're just your mom's kid.
Just waiting to like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
well, and even because their family members,
and they didn't even know, like, where did these people go?
They just vanished.
And I remember when they were going, east, you think like, okay, good, like they went out east, these killers.
Yeah,
but they couldn't find them when they went.
So because of all of these tactics, they were kind of trying to think outside the box, right? But the police were actually criticized for their actions, as this was very out of the box and very costly. But they were desperate to solve these horrific murders. And you know what? I would rather that than the fucking shit that's going on these days where people are like, oh, we don't want to solve this one. It's not the husband that did it. No way.
Yeah.
But fuck. Like, at least they're going out of their way. They're doing things that will help jog somebody's
With a lot of
memory.
heart and soul.
Exactly. We need these guys back on the force. Get out of retirement.
We need the 80s back is what we need. Fucking time machine.
So,
except for the molesting part.
Yeah, leave the molesting out, but everything else, bring it back. Well, actually, cops really always said she probably ran away for every single person. So
these 7 children ran away.
Yes. In this case, they're doing a great job. But a year had passed with nothing. Over 12,000 tips poured in, but there were still no significant leads in the murder of 3 generations of this family.
And how fucked up is that?
It's fucked up.
Yeah.
And then, 15 months later, police get the phone call they had been waiting for. George Bentley's truck and camper had been found in Clearwater, hidden on top of Trophy Mountain.
Right where they started.
Mm-hmm. They had been on a wild goose hunt for this truck across Canada, but it was under their noses the whole time. 50 feet further than where the truck was a large reservoir. So, obviously, using all their police work, they could tell that somebody was trying to really get rid of this truck, but basically it had gotten stuck. So the person
they tried to push it down the cliff, but
it got stuck.
Yeah.
Thank the universe.
And
they airlifted.
Even the airlifting. So they tried to take it out once with a helicopter that wasn't heavy enough because it was such a big truck to lift out of such a small, like, remote place. Like, imagine how the killer even got the truck there.
No, and that's the thing. They knew that somebody, so obviously the person who had hidden the car and now the person who had hidden the camper and the truck, somebody was familiar with this area, because you can't just, I'm going to go up here. I wonder if anyone ever goes here. You know that nobody's going to go up
local,
there.
yo.
Mm-hmm. So another tip came in about 3 days later. A man said he had seen that truck and trailer at a campsite called Old Bear Creek Camp, which once was used, it was like a jail site.
It was a jail, yeah.
They found what appeared to be the Bentley Johnson's campsite with a fire pit, 2 marshmallow roasting sticks, and some beers that were still sitting in the river. So sad.
It's really sad. When you see pictures of Bob, he was always drinking this certain type of beer. And I remember those bottles. Any of you that are older adults, remember the rounded beer
25.
bottles. And then our parents used to let us make root beer in these beer bottles afterwards. So we'd walk around with like these real beer bottles, pretend we're drinking beer, but it's just root beer.
You can make root beer?
Yeah.
God. Well, that's what shocked me at that sentence. So yeah, the favorite beer of Bob Johnson's was sitting in the river, and they found 6 spent .22 caliber shells. So they knew at that time that this was the scene of the horrific murders of the 6 family members, but like they do sometimes, investigators decided not to release this and to keep this as holdback evidence. So we've touched on this a lot of times. Holdback evidence is evidence that the police have, and the only other person that would know this evidence is the perpetrator. So the killer is going to be the only person, because nobody knew. They never said where they were camping. So nobody knew where they were camping.
Just
that's
like
why it was
just
hard.
Like a vagary.
Well, that's why it was hard, because also that area is so large that they could have camped in 1,000 different spaces. And
5,000.
5,000 different spaces. And their truck and trailer were missing. So how did they know where they were? So this obviously just kind of hit it home for them.
And another piece of the holdback evidence was that there was a bullet found in the door of the truck.
Yes. So given where the truck, the car, and the campsite were located, investigators knew that the person responsible had to have in-depth knowledge of the area and had to be very familiar with the park's terrain. So having so little to work with, police now had 2 pieces of holdback evidence. A bullet hole was found in the side of the truck door. They canvassed the area again.
And they were going into people's houses. They were serious about it.
Yeah. Well, because given how big the area was, I don't think there was too many people that lived around there. It wasn't a huge overpopulated place.
No.
One person questioned mentioned that a man by the name of David Shearing had a problem with a bullet hole in the door of a truck that he needed fixed. Well,
yeah, he was seen
neon flag.
driving a truck with a bullet hole in the door.
Days later, a police officer was having coffee in Clearwater when a waitress slipped him a note. This waitress is a real MVP.
Yeah.
The note had a name on it, and the name was David Shearing. David Shearing was now on the top of their list, which didn't have, I don't think, any of their names.
I don't think it was maybe.
She was the sole name.
So there was another phone call that came in saying that David Shearing had run over and killed a man years before and had never been caught for it. So now the police had David Shearing to question.
Yeah,
because they had this.
I just put a period and then I didn't put anything else, and Mom is reading it.
Now the police had period.
Yeah. Well, now the question police had was who was David Shearing. Police didn't have enough evidence to charge him, but he was no stranger to the local police. David had been on the radar for some thefts, and the police actually had a gun pulled on them, which is a really good way to get yourself familiar with the police, basically by one of his friends when they showed up to question him about the theft. A friend pulled out a gun on the cops. So, I mean, that's probably going to...
And his face looked like it had been...
He looked 65 years old.
Beat out of it.
We had a big hook nose.
And, like, been broken about 50 times.
And this is the thing. He was only... We're going to... you guys can Google because I don't like to fucking put the pictures of them on there. But he was 24 years old and he looked older than my grandfather. I don't know. He lived a rough life. That was the weird thing
we were talking about earlier. Is how come people look so old?
I don't know. Something in the water. Maybe all the fluoride. I don't know.
Ugh.
Before they started filtering it out. So David Shearing only lived 2 miles up the road from the campsite police believed that the family was killed in. David had been questioned earlier in the investigation and cleared. He was a hunter, and he also had a Remington 22, which police now believe to be the murder weapon. They brought him in for questioning. David chain-smoked as he was questioned. Police accused David of the death of David Carter, which would be the man that he ran over, years before. And to their dismay, David instantly confessed. He wrote a statement retelling the events of the night he ran over David Carter, but police let him know that this is not the real reason that they had brought him in. When police asked David if he had any information on the Johnson Bentley murders, David instantly stiffened up and avoided eye contact. They asked him if he knew where they were murdered. He answered, "Yeah, weren't they killed in the old Bear Creek campsite?" As if it were common knowledge. David, gotcha, motherfucker. David instantly started crying, and the police officer questioning David said, "You knew we would come for you, didn't you?" And David replied, "Yeah." He said, "I saw them on the way home from work and sat in the bush watching them." Fucking weirdo. "They were having so much fun. The second night I went down there and they were there again. I took my 22 with me this time. Bob Johnson stood up and looked at me as I walked towards them, and I shot him." He didn't use their names, but he said the younger man, but I'm going to use his name. "The younger woman stood up to run away, so I shot her too." That's Jackie. "Then the old man started walking towards me, George, so I shot him. The older woman, Edith, was running towards the back of the camper, so I shot her in the back of the head. The first guy I shot was still alive, so I went back and shot him again." When asked about the girls, he said they were in the tent. He said to the girls, "There is a bad man, and your parents said to stay in the tent. I left them there and dragged the other bodies into the beige car. I went back to get the girls. They sat in the front of the car, and I told them I was going to take them somewhere safe. I told them not to get out of the car because there were bears and wolves that would eat them."
And it's so heartbreaking that he had these girls in the car with all of their dead relatives piled in the back, and the girls were in the front seat of the car. And he says that they believed his story.
Yeah, but how could they?
Yeah.
And also, this is coming from him, which...
So he's trying to minimize.
Yes, obviously. He told police that he set up a tent for the girls, but after a couple of days, he brought them to an old cabin in the woods. Someone knocked on the door the next morning, and when David peered out the window, he saw what appeared to be a prison guard with prisoners in the river. He told the children not to say a word and open the door.
So sad, because those girls were still alive and they were right there.
Yeah, and, obviously you want to say, why didn't you yell? Why didn't you? But
they were so paralyzed with fear, I'm sure.
Of course. The prison guard said, "I'm just here to let you know that we're doing some fishing, but we'll be out of here shortly. I didn't want you to be alarmed." So David just said, okay, and probably tried to just, okay, see ya, and shut the door. So They said he returned, and Janet asked, skipped ahead. Late that afternoon, David says he brought the kids back to the campground. He told the youngest one, Karen, that he had to show her something. He shot her in the back of the head. They said that he said that he returned, and Janet asked about Karen. He led her to the same place as he brought Karen, told her to turn around, and shot her as well. Which David said that he claimed that because who just does that? Who just does that? If you have a gun already, you could probably easily, if you're trying to steal all their possessions, which is what he claimed. He said...
Yeah, that's why he claimed he did it, but that didn't really make very much sense.
No, and police knew that that's probably not why, that's not a motive to kill a whole family.
No.
And it was the 80s, so...
They didn't, yeah. And you couldn't pawn anything like that close to home.
Yeah. He agreed to walk officers through the sites and drew maps that led them to George Bentley's aluminum boat and motor. He reenacted the ambush with no remorse. He was charged with 6 counts of second-degree murder, which I think should have been first. So, yeah. There were doubts that one man could be responsible for all these murders.
Once the trial started, he pled guilty to all 6 counts, but his friends and family were in disbelief. They wrote letters, to pump him up and say how good his character was. And I saw interviews with his brother and his sister-in-law, and they were like, he could never have done this.
Yeah.
They described him as a quiet and retiring person who would rather be fishing or in the wilderness. He was so comfortable
in the wilderness.
And his school counselor even wrote that he was an above-average student. His family said he was loving and devoted. He was a great part of their family, and he'd even returned home working away to take care of the family ranch when his father fell ill.
Yeah. And his father passed away just 4 months before the murder. So, he began to drink heavily, but we do see when someone snaps, it's usually because there's been a life event, a life-altering event that's happened in their lives. So obviously no excuse, but that's going to be right there, something that kind of helps the case, because it's like, okay, he admitted it, but let's say, it's a psychological thing that if something sets you off, you're going to go and probably do something horrible if it's in you. But that's what people said about Ted Bundy too. He was a fucking politician or
a lawyer.
A lawyer, and he was so nice and so this, but people are not always who they show to be.
No. That demon is living within them.
Yeah, and there was actually talk around the town that David had a thing for young girls, which is why the police, without even knowing that, they suspected that was probably the real motive for them all being murdered. So when asked why, David said he didn't really know why he did it, but he wanted the car and the camper. Shearing was sentenced to life in jail.
And at the time, it was the longest sentence anyone had ever had.
Yeah, and right away, as soon as he got into jail, he changed his name because no one's going to know who you are. Because, I guess it wasn't the time of social media, but if I saw that face,
his mother's maiden name.
Yeah, Ennis. His last name's now Ennis. So he's in jail as David Ennis. And after he was sentenced, officers returned to question him. They insisted, they said, you know the real motive. And they believed it was something more sinister. When an officer had returned to the cabin, he found the initials carved into the wood of the cabin of DS and JJ, David Shearing and Janet Johnson.
So Janet was actually the
oldest
daughter, and she was the intended target. They figure he was fixated on her, and when he was stalking and watching, and it was sexually motivated.
Yeah. Shearing did not admit this straight away. He went into prison where he changed his name to David Ennis, and in 1994, he married a woman named Heather. They wrote letters back and forth and had conjugal visits, which is such a fucking shit.
Who the fuck would do that?
Well, no, yeah, those people who marry people like that are weirdos, especially if you look at the crime in itself. Why would you ever marry someone like that? But also the fact that these people can have things, Kelly Ellard from episode 1, getting married, having children, doing all these things. Having sex should be, you shouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. No. You should be, when you
get your
choose.
wiener cut off after you rape 2 kids.
You should. You should. So in 2008, David was eligible for parole.
Like, can you imagine that? You killed 6 fucking people.
Yeah, you shouldn't go anywhere. You shouldn't even be on a thought for parole. The family read victim impact statements and had a 10,000 signature petition to keep him behind bars. He was denied parole. But this, of course, was the time of the sick fuck clause, which saw murderers have a parole review every 2 years, putting families through hell over and over again. Over the years, more details have come out about what he had done to the girls. He recalled keeping them chained and apparently said this with no emotion.
And he had them, they figure, for
A couple
week.
days. Oh, a week. Well,
Yeah.
the one I think he maybe didn't have for as long, the younger one.
But he had them for a long time. It wasn't just a couple days.
Yeah. Yeah. In 2016, the families were instrumental with changing the parole board's reviews to every 5 years. However, convicted murderers are still eligible to apply for parole a year after they are denied. In 2021, now 62 years old, there was a petition with nearly 90,000 signatures to keep him behind bars. Shearing has completed multiple sex offender courses, which good, that's great, but that doesn't take back what you did, and that shouldn't make it like, oh, I did some courses, now I'm going back into the, no.
And in 1985, he admitted to stalking other potential victims, and they figure he is probably a psychopath and has sexual sadism and antisocial and schizoid personality traits.
Yeah. His wife of 26 years, Heather, said that if David is released, he is not welcome to live with her. What a marriage.
But I'll just go to the jail and fuck him.
Yes. Crazy. David Shearing's next mandatory parole hearing is set for 2026, but he can apply for an unescorted temporary absence at any time. Good job, Canada.
Yep.
This man, and he's only 62. He probably looks 180, but he's 62. He's still able-bodied.
Yeah.
He's still
He's
able.
probably working out every day in
Yes.
prison.
But that's it. You're going to let him
It's a
out with an
stereotype, I don't know.
unescorted so him and Randall Hopley can fucking take off together?
Yep.
So it has now been 40 years that the Johnson Bentley, it has now been 40 years, and the Johnson Bentley Memorial Aquarium Center in West Kelowna has been named in their honor, and the family continues to fight to keep David Shearing behind bars and even to change the whole criminal justice system. They are big advocates because just like us, just like every other Canadian, and especially the ones who have had their
Victims,
lives impacted by a murder or a crime that has happened to their loved one, you know, you don't want to see this continuing. You don't want to see this happening every time.
It just really makes me wonder, though, what do we have to do to change things here?
No.
I mean, you've had families of someone that they've lost 6 family members. You've had families like Lindsay Buziak's dad, who's been like a staunch advocate over and over and over and over. Like it's driving the surviving family members crazy to try to get justice and to try to get our justice system changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, even Chelsea Poorman, who we've covered before, I just watched a special on her, and there is a huge crisis going on, and we've touched on this with the murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people, that they are going missing and nobody is
still,
and it's like they're found in very, very, very like suspicious circumstances.
And our law enforcement is saying they died of natural causes, not suspicious at all.
Which, okay, but how did they
How'd you get
there?
a blanket on top of you?
Well, how did you climb a fence when you couldn't even, there's so many things, right? I could go on and on about that. But what I was trying to say is these families are being put, like, they're just like, okay, see ya. And now they're forced, basically, to advocate for their loved ones.
For the rest of their lives.
Yes, it's like they've been given a task, right? I mean, it's crazy that they can't just mourn in peace and have justice for their loved one.
Nope,
they have to be the one to
advocate for justice and also face the criminals at parole hearings
every couple years.
Yeah.
So that was episode 51. I mean, it's a big one. It's a very sad case.
It's an important one in our history, though.
Well, and especially because it was so many years ago, right? I mean, everybody in Canada should, even further, they should know about this case, and a lot of people do not, right? Wells Gray is a beautiful, beautiful park, but it has such a horrible history if you really look. Like, this is 6 family members were just taken. Their lives were taken for a selfish reason. And I mean, that is most of the time what we see. It's never a reason where, you know, it's life insurance or sexually motivated, all these things. These people, these perpetrators are selfish, horrible, evil people. And then it's like, okay, see you in 20 years. See you later. And get an unescorted absence. It's crazy to me. These people should lose any kind of chance for any kind of normalcy in their lives. Getting married, going out. See, I'm just going to take a little trip from jail. Like, no.
Yeah.
What's the other guy's name? Trevor Ertmode? Is that his name? The killer of Heather Thomas?
Shane Ertmode.
Shane. Oh, well, I don't even care what your name is. Trevor, Shane, you fucking suck, and you should stay in jail for the rest of your life. No matter what you have done since that, your time is up, and it should be, and that's what we are really going to advocate for in the new year. We're going to write everyone we can. I'm already working on something. I'm going to go to wherever I can go to get heard, and I'm going to the news.
I'm going to take my clothes off on the Parliament building.
All right. Well, look out for Mom naked on the Parliament building. She's also probably going to go and egg someone's house that lives over there, too.
Probably.
But not. Never mind. But anyway.
Just kidding.
That was episode 51 of Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast, where I talk murder with my mother. Bye, guys.
See you later.